In the US president's latest move in the conflict with Canada, Trump has written the Canadian Prime Minister a letter with new threats, but some believe we're about to see a major reversal, one that could put Canada in a far stronger position than it was before. And whether or not these new threats will remain or if they'll be reversed largely comes down to a major new set of laws coming into effect in America. Though with the other elephant in the room, could all of this noise just be a distraction? Let's talk about it. You may have already seen the letter that the president wrote to Canada's prime minister, but here are the key highlights. Citing one of the original reasons for this tariff conflict, he talks about the fentanyl crisis, but says that on August 1st, they're going to be charging Canada a tariff of 35% on Canadian products sent into the US, separate from any CUSMA or USMCA agreement goods. Now, he also points out that if we choose to retaliate, then whatever amount we retaliate by will be added on top of that 35%. He also takes issue with dairy tariffs and the supply management practices that are going on in Canada. He concludes by saying, if you take care of the fentanyl issue, we will perhaps consider changing this, but we might change these at any time, depending on our relationship with your country. You'll never be disappointed with the United States of America. Thank you for your attention. Some loose language here that we'll talk about in a bit. So it seems that the biggest issue with Canada is the whole fentanyl issue. But a new report out of the States, a university in Pittsburgh called Carnegie Mellon, they've put out some new findings that claim it's actually not that big of a deal. The study compares large fentanyl busts in different counties that are on the southern border of the states and the northern border of the states, and they say that efforts to counter drug flows need to be grounded in data. They say their analysis contradicts views that treat the flow across the southern and northern borders as being comparably important, making the claim that, the northern border isn't actually all that important in this issue. But a data-based study like this won't convince everyone. When you have a data-based study, it's only as good as that data. There are always going to be people who say, this is a result of poor enforcement and us not having the true numbers of what's really going on. In reality, it's hard to know for sure. And more views are being shared that is convincing people that maybe there's a bigger problem in Canada than previously thought. One of the largest podcasts in America, The Sean Ryan Show, recently had a Canadian journalist on who's now primarily covering US and Mexico cartel activities, and she had some things to say that a lot of Americans heard.
Prior to this, it was meth labs that they had running out there. And there would always be like a random meth lab explosion in Abbotsford or, this is like a smaller city. And then these turned into fentanyl labs that were completely under the radar because we also didn't have Canadian law enforcement like patrolling these areas to an extent that they would patrol like a large city like Vancouver or Toronto. Set up shop, negotiate and network with pre-existing organized crime groups in Canada, whether that be the Hells Angels, a big one, or Brothers Keepers or Red Scorpion or the United Nations gang, and say, hey, look, you guys have incredible access. Okay, over 5,000 miles of practically unprotected border into the United States. We can produce this product here and traffic it. If you let us, Sinaloa or Jalisco, in to work with you guys, we're going to quadruple profits.
So she alleges that pre-existing cartels are working with pre-existing gangs in Canada to produce fentanyl, and they're taking advantage of thousands of kilometers of rather porous borders in Canada in order to bring this into the United States. Now, will you believe this, or do you believe the data-based studies that they're talking about saying, actually there are so few busts on the northern border that it's not an issue? And I'm curious what you think about that, but it certainly seems like the Trump administration thinks that the northern border is a big issue as he continues to press on this in this most recent threat or in this letter. But the punishing tariffs that are set to come into place on August 1st, there's reason to believe that this may not be as helpful in the long term as previously thought. A major reversal in America's ability to use these tariffs to help their negotiating position with Canada. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, and that's Incogn. Now, you might not know this, but you've definitely seen the negative impacts of it. Despite personal information information laws, there are thousands of companies around the world who are collecting and trading your personal data, even if you haven't yet consented to it. This has happened to me personally. I've signed up for various newsletters and seen an uptick in spam calls and emails that I get from unrelated senders I don't want to hear from. But the good news is you can request that that data is removed by those data brokers. They have to delete the information they have about you. The bad news is it would take ages to do all of this manually one by one. That's why I use Incogn. They'll reach out to these data traders on your behalf, saving you countless hours. And you can get 60% off of Incogn's unlimited and family unlimited plans by using the link in the description. I asked Incogn to remove me from these databases and just look at all the places that they found and then removed my data from. And with Incogn's new custom removal feature, you can point to any website where you find your information, and one of Incogn's privacy agents will take care of the rest for you. These days, with everything we put out online, I worry about someone I don't know finding out my address or my phone number or even personal information about my family members. But by using Incogn, I have the peace of mind that I'm at the very least doing everything I can to prevent that. So go to incogn.com/Russell and use code Russell, that's RUSSELL, to get an exclusive offer of 60% off the unlimited plan or include up to 4 additional members with the family unlimited plan. That's incogn.com/Russell and use code Russell or click the link below to take your personal data off of the market. There could be some major changes to the negotiating positions between Canada and the US coming in the not too distant future. Now, Pete Navarro, who is one of the counselors for trade and manufacturing to President Donald Trump, well, he recently went on Bloomberg talking about Canada, and he had this to say, and it all connects.
What the Canadian leadership needs to understand, as opposed to the Canadian people, which we love, is that this waving this big bat of retaliation at the United States of America, I mean, no, they shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. They just don't have the weight in terms of any advantage they might have at us. So I would just urge Canada the Canadian citizens to urge their leaders to negotiate fairly with us.
Now, it may hurt to say personally as a Canadian citizen, but I think in some ways he's kind of right. I mean, I would love if Canada was this giant economic player that had real leverage, but is that really the case, even if we wish it were the case? I think we'd like to think of ourselves as being extremely significant on the world stage. After all, as citizens, we think a lot about Canada. But do other countries have their attention on us or dramatically depend on our resources and us for much? I mean, we can talk a big game about doing all these giant economic projects as the Carney government is doing in Canada to make ourselves independent or to sign historic trade deals to diversify away from the US in terms of trade. And I say, sure, go for it. They're all great ideas. But these are good ideas that take years to actually see the benefits of, the benefits that we need to see right now. I mean, sure, with all these things, we may have more leverage in the future, but that won't really help. That'll be after these US-Canada negotiations are done, and there likely will be someone new in the White House. So where does that leave us today? And it may look to many like the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has put himself in somewhat of a corner. I mean, he's framed himself as this incredible business-minded negotiator who's perfect for standing up to Trump. I mean, that's how he won the election, right? But now he might be finding that there's not as much leverage as he previously thought there was. But that all could change. Some are reporting that there may be a change in this leverage position. Now, of course, the way that Trump's administration has been negotiating, it's been very on and off. You know this as well as I do. There's a new tariff here. Wait, we're pausing it. Now there's a threat of another tariff. Oh, now we're stopping all negotiations entirely until you remove the digital sales tax. And, oh, well, actually, you did that, but you thought we were heading in the right direction. Well, here's another 35% tariff. Well, this tool, the ability to turn these tariffs on and off at the president's sole discretion, that tool, the most critical one for these negotiations, I'd say, is being challenged. Now, there are two things that give the president the ability to be so quick moving with these tariffs and with these changes to their economic policy. One is Section 232, and one is IEEPA, or the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Now, each of these different tools gives the president the power to do what he pleases when it comes to trade policy. Section 232 is about national security. Essentially, the president can deem any import as being a matter of national security. Say that's steel or some other technology that they deem to be in the nation's interest to protect and to nationalize. Well, they can say, okay, we've got to slow down the bringing in of this good from another country. That's Section 232. Now, the other one is the IEEPA, and essentially, well, because at the beginning of Trump's term, he said, well, we're in a state of emergency when it comes to Canada because of fentanyl. Well, now he can make any changes to tariffs and economic policies that he wants. But recent filings are showing that, okay, this is being challenged in the courts. The Trump administration has appealed the things that are saying, well, actually, maybe these tools can't constitutionally be used. But if the ruling is upheld, these tariffs could end. Now, that would be a big deal for the negotiating position of Canada, because all of a sudden, this major tool that the U.S. has access to sort of impose their will upon Canada when it comes to the economy, well, that could be diminishing. By this logic, some say that the best choice for Canada is to just wait and hope that the courts take care of this and no longer will these tariffs be able to be applied, improving our negotiating position and maybe getting Canada a better deal. But will that all actually play out, and will waiting in anticipation of that, a thing that may potentially never come, is that a wise way to go about these negotiations? I'm not so certain. And as we do move forward in these negotiations, it seems like we're negotiating in the press right now, releasing these letters, having all these claims and these concessions happening, all without a formal written agreement. Now, right now, there's no real higher decision maker in this conflict. The World Trade Organization only has authority when there's consensus amongst its member states on how things should be handled. And with the off and on nature of these negotiations, as well as that last paragraph in the letter that I showed you at the beginning of the video, talking about if you make these changes, well, we might then change the tariffs on you. Well, I think any written agreement that we get is going to need protections for this Section 232 and IEEPA exemptions. Something that says, okay, on these goods, you cannot change tariffs for this period of time, even when it comes to this national security concern or this Emergency Act type concern. Because if we don't get something like that, well, I think the U.S. might be just fine with keeping tariffs as they are, especially after this recent report. It's being reported that the U.S. has raked in around $100 billion U.S. as a result of Trump's tariff policy, that line item becoming the fourth largest revenue source for the U.S. government. So with $100 billion coming in, well, maybe the U.S. is thinking, well, we can, worst case scenario, just leave these tariffs and rake in these billions of dollars as people pay to access the vast amount of consumers in the American market. And ultimately, as with everything these days, all this ties into the big, beautiful bill in the U.S., something that was poised to affect Canadians dramatically before these the recent backing down on the digital sales tax. We were going to have all kinds of investment taxes applied to us. It seems that has been removed alongside this digital sales tax removal. With the hundreds of billions of dollars being spent as a result of this big, beautiful bill, something that has largely split the coalition of voters who brought Trump to power in the first place for the second term, well, it seems that maybe they're going to be saying this $100 billion from tariffs is helping to offset this dramatic spending that the U.S. government is doing moving forward. But it's hard to know anything for certain before we have a deal in writing, and even then, without protections, will that deal in writing stick? And maybe all of this noise right now, while we don't have a firm deal, could be a distraction for other things. Of course, the big news right now is all of the handling of the Epstein case when it comes to Trump and his administration. Now, that might be something that both Trump and Carney would be happy to see not talked about a ton, given these circles that they interact with, the wealthy and the elite people of this world, who are the ones who are reportedly wrapped up in this major scandal. Or in Carney's case specifically, we just got a report from the Conflict of Interest Act that shows all of the assets that Mark Carney holds, many of these possibly benefiting from some of the policies that he seeks to put forward. It's obviously very hard to avoid conflicts of interest when you have lists of hundreds and hundreds of shares, many of which are U.S. companies, which isn't entirely unreasonable, but some people have taken a displeasure to seeing so much of a Canadian Prime Minister's investments being tied up in America, even if for a reasonable investor, that is probably reasonable to do. So maybe the news of tariffs and the taking them away and the pausing and the starting is more of something to get our attention off of other things. Is that a little bit tinfoil hatty for you, or do you think that I'm onto something there? And how do you think all of this is going to play out? What do you think of the way that I've kind of framed this? Canada doesn't have a lot of leverage in my eyes. Am I right on that? Or am I underselling the power that Canada has in this situation? Let me know down in the comments. I read them all. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. You can also, if you want to further support videos like this, join the channel membership, which will be linked in the description. We have monthly group calls as well as a private group chat. We'd love to see you in there as well. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.